if you don't trust your bank, maybe you want to hold assets that you can manage directly. And that's the US. Now, take all of that and apply it to a country like Argentina. In my lifetime, Argentina's peso has been devalued to such a degree that I'm not sure if you had equivalent million USD in Argentinian pesos, do you want to trust that banking system and that government to manage your currency in such a way that you're not going to lose your value? I think I might trust, even with some volatility in crypto, I might trust something different.
우리가 은행을 믿지 못한다면 크립토가 새로운 대안이 될 수 있다고 말하고 있는 현재 이 남성은 암호화폐 시장에서 가장 뜨거운 화두이자 상징적인 코인인 리플의 CEO 브래드갈링하우스입니다. 현재 지루하고 불안정한 시장 흐름 속에서 그가 말하는 리플의 미래 그리고 전반적인 크립토 시장의 향후 가치와 가능성에 대한 최근 두바이 핀테크 서밋에서의 갈링하우스의 디테일한 견해와 인사이트를 함께 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
Now it happens to be that the segment that Ripple is particularly focused on, cross-border payments, has been historically dominated by SWIFT, which also has a very high error rate, because if I'm sending a wire transfer and instead of Dan Murphy, I spell it with one letter wrong, and I'm sending that, it's going to get bounced back. If it's going through multiple correspondent banks along the way, that's going to take a lot of time. And I mean, literally, you'll hear horror stories of a wire transfer going missing. Rarely do they go missing forever. That's very, very rare. However, you could have an error, 6% of all wire transfers are ending up bounced back. Imagine if 6% of every Google search just came back with a 404 error. We would not be using Google the way we do today, but it's a reflection of SWIFT was built 50 years ago, and it's a one-way messaging protocol. We can do the same thing with newer, really internet-based technology. I kind of make the joke that we can stream video from the space station, but we can't move our own money efficiently between currencies and countries. It's just a crazy reality that we live in, and we are changing it bit by bit. Ripple now is doing billions of dollars of transactions, and I said that, this region has been clearly progressive and leaning into these technologies and taking advantage of those benefits.
What about in the remittance market specifically, which is ripe for disruption? A number of smaller players now entering into that space and really taking advantage of the cross-border flows that we see here in the UAE and other large remittance markets like Saudi Arabia, for example.
I love this question because the World Bank has published that the average remittance cost is 700 basis points for a population that really can least afford it. Now you think about that, 700 basis points, and the goal, they have set at the World Bank level a goal by 2030 to reach to 300 basis points. Now on one hand you would say, well that's a lot of improvement. On the other hand, 300 basis points, like our goal should be 30 basis points. Again, what I struggle with is this is an audience, this is a community that can least afford these costs that is being taxed at a much higher rate. If you or I were to go and invest in another company in another country, we're not paying 700 bips to move that money cross-border. And so I find it a negative reflection of where we are, that even our goal is 300 bips. Now, to your point, what is exciting is you see companies building their entire infrastructure on next generation infrastructure that reduces that cost dramatically. There's a company here locally called People, spelled PYPPL, is building their entire next generation remittance on Ripple's technology. They're already doing payouts in, I think, 20 different markets. And it is an opportunity to build at a very low cost, very scalable, and to pass those savings on to customers. And so they're seeing their business grow very well.
Just on some macro notes as well, I wanted to ask you about what's happening, not just in the US, but globally when it comes to cryptocurrencies. Do you think the issues that we've seen in regional banks have perhaps caused a rethink when it comes to how people viewing cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ether, for example? Obviously, they've rallied through this.
It really is interesting to note, because I think people would say in a world where there's fear, why haven't you seen more of a retrenchment crypto asset values? The overall market is well off its lows. I'll use Bitcoin as a proxy. I think its low was 16 or 17,000. Now it's at roughly 30, maybe it's 28 today. I think it's a reflection of, the previous panel was talking about how important trust, the word trust came up a lot. And I think, when you start to erode that trust in the US banking system, some of that trust has eroded. I don't mind sharing, Ripple, the company, had hundreds of millions of dollars on deposit at Silicon Valley Bank. I had a moment of very tough Friday, wondering what's going to happen here. And I think it brings up this: if you don't trust the banking infrastructure, and the U.S. arguably is, at least in the top quartile banks you should be able to trust. Yet here we have two of the two top 5 bank failures ever in the United States very recently with SVB and First Republic. If you don't trust your bank, maybe you want to hold assets that you can manage directly. And that's the US. Now, Matt, take all of that and apply it to a country like Argentina. In my lifetime, Argentina's peso has been devalued to such a degree that I'm not sure if you had equivalent million USD in Argentinian pesos, do you want to trust that banking system and that government to manage your currency in such a way that you're not going to lose your value? I think I might trust, even with some volatility in crypto, I might trust something different. I believe what you're seeing in the crypto market is a long-term view that these technologies are here to stay. They solve problems in various ways, and what we're just discussing is around store of value. But you can also use these technologies, as Ripple is, to solve enterprise-based financial services problems, to make things far more efficient. And I think that's going to continue to drive demand also.
Just while we have you, can you tell us the story about SVP? Where were you when you found out that the bank was in trouble, and what did you do?
I was on an airplane, and a friend of mine said to me, hey, have you noticed that SVB's stock price is down whatever percent today? I was not paying attention. We did an internal call very quickly. Like any bank run, you don't want to be part of the problem. And we took a kind of, hey, we don't want to be part of the problem. We were in money market funds, so we felt more secure. But it, I think, highlights how fear can drive, and the acceleration there that happened. There's a concentrated audience, not necessarily the companies, but the venture capital community in Silicon Valley. I think, in my opinion, they really caused that run, and because they told all their portfolio companies, hey, you should be afraid. And I don't think the US government handled that particularly well, in my opinion. But I guess hopefully we're getting past that crisis. FRB, First Republic Bank, obviously, JP Morgan taking that over, hopefully stems some of the fear, but we shall see.
And just finally, since the collapse of FTX, we've seen this cross-agency regulatory crackdown in the United States. Some within the digital asset community are calling it Operation Choke Point 2.0. How do you see this playing out?
Well, look, I have two reactions. My first reaction is Ripple, and I think many crypto companies are going to go where we are welcome. The US GDP is 22% of global GDP. It's the largest market, but guess what? 78% of the market is not the US. And so, for the time being, and for me, kind of as far as the eye can see, I don't think the US is going to be particularly friendly. I think if Coinbase could go back and do it over, they probably wouldn't have gone public in the United States, because that has created some headwinds for them. But I think if you look out, the more we focus on utility, the more we focus on the leadership we're seeing in markets like the UAE and in Europe and in Hong Kong and Singapore, the more I think that will draw attention to the fact that you are not hiring in the United States, and hopefully eventually we'll see the legislature enact new laws to provide the clarity that the market has demanded.